Welcome everyone to this special night from the Sangeet Foundation. We are celebrating Happiness Day and Festival of Hope. So if you're sitting next to someone that you don't know, please greet them, say hi to your neighbour. You know, this is Happiness Night. We have some exciting things in store for you. We have a panel discussion, we have a music concert, and of course the part that everyone loves, the food court, which is at the end. The main reason why we are here, and if you don't know me already as well, my name is Deborah. I'm also Jonata's fellow student. I'm also a PhD student who is doing something in terms of community resilience. So if you would like to find out more about what I'm doing, please go to the COS stall. They are literally just to your left. The main reason why we are all here is for the Sangeet Foundation. And if you don't know about them, they're all about creating awareness for the mental health and happiness and community resilience. And it's all through creative arts. When we look at what is going on today, it's only right that we remember Ukraine and we stand in solidarity with all the countries that are going through hardship. And we have to give thanks to charities like the Comic Relief who support and work against poverty, violence and discrimination. And we also have to forget people who have contributed, our fantastic sponsors and supporters, the Nationwide Wellness, Wealth and Home, COS, and of course Mega Sound by our very own panelist Deepak Pawar. So before I get on with the pleasantries, I think I've spoken enough, and I would like to now introduce our very own Narupa. She is an engineer with an MBA, working for a global aerospace company, a passionate singer. She has multiple accolades. She's won various music competitions, and she is also one of the winners of the multi-Fusion pageants like Mrs. India UK, and she's also taken part in Miss Earth pageant in Los Angeles. She's also a philanthropist and involved with the Sangeet Foundation to spread mental health and autism. So please give me and give her a round of applause to Narupa.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Deborah, for that kind introduction. I'm privileged, I'm honored, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to host this panel discussion today, and so excited to see all of you today here to support this important cause and recognizing how important it is. So your support definitely means a lot to the organization and to myself. Actually, talking about happiness, today it's an interesting day, isn't it? It's 20th of March, it's the International Day of Happiness. As we know that currently the world is going through unprecedented challenges, it's facing unprecedented challenges, and it's a quite difficult time that we all are going through. And at this point in time, I think mental health matters more than ever. And as we continue to fight and respond to the COVID pandemic, United Nations, has picked up the theme of this year's International Day of Happiness as let's take action to build back happier. Wow, build back happier. Do we really know what makes us happy? It's a very interesting question, isn't it? We keep asking ourselves, what makes us happy? But do we really know what the right recipe is? Definitely, a good mental health contributes towards happiness. But can we really say that somebody who is going through mental disorders generally do not enjoy or experience some moments of happiness? Probably not. So there are lots of questions that we keep asking ourselves, and today's discussion is all about mental health. Today's panel discussion is about mental health because although we learned this saying from our childhood that health is wealth, It's not just physical health. Mental health plays an equally important role, and very privileged to have all our respectable panel members today to have some very useful and interesting conversation around the topic of mental health. So without me saying any more, I would start introducing the panel members one at a time. So I'll start with Professor Nandini Chakraborty. Professor Nandini Chakraborty, she's a consultant psychiatrist in early intervention in psychosis, Leicester Partnership NHS Trust. So happy to have you, Dr. Nandini, today in the session. Any opening comments from you on this topic for this discussion today?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Nabarupa. Talking about happiness, mental health, well-being, where do we even start? As a psychiatrist in early intervention in psychosis, as you've heard, my day job is to deal with the tip of the iceberg. I deal with some very seriously unwell patients. But that is not the context which is suitable or relevant to society at large. At large, when we are talking about our mental health, when we are talking about mental well-being, very few of us will have first-hand experience of serious mental illness, thankfully. But what I would say as a society today is that until we demythicize mental health, unless we break the stigma, unless we break the myths, we do the most vulnerable in our society a disservice. And thereby, as a psychiatrist, I passionately feel about talking regarding serious mental illness, not to frighten you all, because I want to reassure you that not many of you will have first-hand experience of it ever, but at least to promote that understanding. I think a civilization is best represented by how much it can take care of the illest people within its midst. And the second strand I would like to introduce today is when we talk about happiness. It's a very interesting concept where we talk about happiness is within. Happiness is very personal. Happiness is what you find within yourself. And yet, as social beings, how can we discover happiness without our friends, without our family, without social equalities, without social support around us? And thereby, it's this paradox and finding the happy medium where, yes, we find what makes us happy, but we need to build societies, we need to build communities which help people to discover that personal happiness. We've got to do both. So with that, I will pass back to Nabarupa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nandini. That's such an interesting opening comment from you. I'll move on to our next panel member, Professor Raghu Raghavan. Professor Raghu Raghavan is the Director, Lifelong Wellbeing Research, Director of Mary C. Cole Research Center, and Co-Director, Leicester Center for Mental Health Research. Very privileged to have you, Dr. Raghu, today. Any opening comments from you?
Thank you. And good evening, and thank you for inviting me to this audience. Happiness, I think happiness starts with us. Happiness is actually something that is actually inside each and every one of us. Buddha once said that happiness is not something that you can actually own or something that you can actually have. It's how one thinks about it. It is entirely our own perspective. From Eastern heritage perspective, from the Indian perspective, I mean, a lot of people, a lot of yogis, a lot of people who have no social contact actually have extreme happiness. So I think I want to look at two things. The way we look at happiness from the Western world perspective and the way we look at happiness from the Eastern perspective too. Because I think culture is important. Culture shapes the way we think, and culture also contributes how we make happiness. So in the modern world, where we believe social media is the guru of happiness, We have more children who have mental health issues because of the addiction to social media. So is that happiness? Or is that something different? It's how we actually make something out of all these things. And I think because mental health is not mental illness. Mental health is something very different. Mental health is what we make out of health and well-being. How we actually go through all the stress and strain of life. There is never going to be a perfect place. There is never going to be a happy world. There will always be negativity. There will always be positivity. There will always be strain. There will always be anxiety. There will always be sadness. But life is all about how we actually steer through those obstacles in life. And I think how we make sense out of it. And I think that is what happiness should be directed at. And I think the Western world, I think we attach too much importance to perhaps that happiness is something externalized, something comes from somewhere outside. And we have successfully over-medicalized sadness in the Western world. So I think we should not be looking at that as a kind of from a psychiatric perspective. I'm an anti-psychiatrist, but I think from a psychiatric perspective, I think we should look at happiness as something that we can help ourselves, that we can actually think about ourselves, that we can actually make ourselves.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Raghu. And it's all the different perspectives that we get to hear from listening to the different panelists. So thank you so much. So I'll move on to Dr. Indrani Lahiri, our next panel member. Dr. Indrani Lahiri, she is the senior lecturer in Media and Communications, Leicester Media School, Computing, Engineering and Media, and also founder of Building Resilience in Children. Welcome, Dr. Indrani. Very happy to have you today in the discussion. Any opening comments from you for this session today?
Thank you very much, Nobel. And to start with, I will just say that this is a kind of event that we have possibly thought about for a long time, but finally it's happening. And I believe that from media perspective, what we are trying to do is trying to understand how we can use digital media, particularly in this age where we are living. Digital living has brought in lots of challenges. And over the last couple of years, we have seen how the digital platforms have also influenced people's happiness. I'm not trying to say here that digital platforms are the source of happiness, but it's actually about building resilience, and it kind of connected to building resilience in a way where communities have come together, worked together, supported each other. And I believe that that was a huge thing that we kind of saw in the last 2 years. Yes, there was a lot of pain, but there was new invented happiness where communities were supporting each other, coming together, and standing by the side of each other, whether they be delivering food parcels or delivering medicines. So I think that this event is much more meaningful now, that we have got different ways of actually framing happiness, and I'm really, really very happy to be part of this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Indrani. We will move on actually to another panel member who is physically not here on stage. Unfortunately, he's not here today, but he was supposed to be one of our panel members. But he has sent a video message. So he's Dr. Amit Ranjan Biswas. Dr. Amit Ranjan Biswas, he is a senior consultant child and adolescent neuropsychiatrist of NHS. And he's also a TEDx speaker. So can we actually get his video message on screen for all of us to view, please?
Namaskar. I'm Amit, Dr. Amit Biswas. I wish you all a very grand success for this wonderful event, Hues of Happiness at Leicester today. Unfortunately, I would not be able to attend the panel discussions on mental health and happiness. And I'm really sad I'll be missing the event. But I wanted to leave you a message and wish you all for an event full of color, happiness, celebration, and joy. Happiness is all about having a sustained sense of joy and fulfillment in our lives. Not just about temporary spikes of pleasure and ice cream moments, but finding ways to bring that depth of contentment. What Greek philosophers talked about eudaimonia, fulfillment, having a flourishing life, where we are radically alive moment by moment. And there are evidence-based ways that we can almost engineer happiness in our life and create a wholesome, fulfilling life for ourselves and each other. Research shows that giving, a benevolence attitude towards life, a grateful living, a radical attitude of gratitude where gratefulness suffuses in every aspect of his life, accepting whatever happens is a gift. And the only response to this gift is thank you. Research shows the most important factor of happiness is having a deep connectedness with each other, with nature, and creating the bonding in social relationship which makes us happy. Looking into the happiest countries like Denmark, Costa Rica, they have deep social bonding, having fun together, relating to each other in a meaningful way. And most importantly after that, creating meaning and purpose in our lives that makes us happy. Taking notice, being mindful on simple, small things in life, moment by moment, that makes it extraordinary, experiencing rather than analyzing all the time. Also, having an active life. Educate ourselves, not being just pedagogy, but being curious, soaking things in, being creative. This is the formula for happiness. Having built-in resilience where we can face adversity and cope with that and bounce back, or even bounce forward. Mental health is common. There is no health outside mental health, without mental health. In post-COVID lives, I work with young people and I have seen the effect of mental illness, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, psychosis that is so rife. From 1 in 9 to 1 in 6 young people in London suffers from some mental health issues. In our North London boroughs, the referrals gone skyrocketed in camp settings. 270% increase in referrals for eating disorders. Important to understand, be aware, recognize the mental illness. At the same time, treating them in an evidence-based ways. Medicine do have a role. But beyond that medical model, beyond reductionist scientific views, we need to create a wholesome idea of recovery. From physiological to emotional to behavioral and even spiritual dimensions of health that brings the wholesome recovery and sustainable sense of happiness and joy so that we bounce back. We have a growth mindset so that we don't just reduce symptoms, but we find the strengths that are already within us, the wisdom that we can touch and bring the hues of happiness, the colors of spring that we can celebrate all life long. I will leave you with that message, and I'm sadly going to miss you all, but wish you good luck. And may you be happy, may you be well, May you celebrate with life with peace and kindness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amit Ranjan Biswas, for that lovely message that you have sent for us. We'll move on to another virtual video that's another panel member who was supposed to be present here but unfortunately couldn't arrive, Mrs. Shubhangi Mitra. She's a co-founder and managing director of Chess Solicitors. Now, you must be wondering really what a lawyer has got to do in the discussion on mental health. She's also the founder of MRFA Foundation, but in her video message,
hello everyone,
she's going to kind of talk around the legal rights and the legal help available. So yeah, her video please, thank you.
Hello everyone, and a very happy Holi to you all. My sincere apologies for not being present today amongst all of you wonderful people. My name is Shubhangi Mitra, the Honorary Legal Advisor of Sangeet Foundation, and today I'll be covering few pointers on your legal rights at workplace and at employment. Most of us who are working full-time has this question: should I tell my employer about my mental health problem? This is a burning question everyone goes through at workplace. It is due to lack of knowledge about their rights, and if you have a mental health problem, you don't want to tell the employer just because you are worried about the confidentiality or how you may be treated. But trust me, as a solicitor, in my opinion, if you indeed have a mental health issue that is categorically known as a disability and you want the protection of law that is under Equality Act, your employer needs to know about this. If you decide to tell your employer, think about how and when to do it. It can be helpful to have a note from your doctor to help explain your situation. How much information you want to give. You don't have to go into the personal details. Just focus on how your mental health problem impacts your job. Whom to share it with. For example, the Human Resources Department or one officer, designated one, may know your diagnosis, but they don't have to tell your colleague, supervisor, or the entire workplace. The next phase, which is mandatory for every employer, is to keep the confidentiality and refer you to occupational health service. Now, what is the occupational health service? Your employer can refer you to occupational health service if you have a mental health issue that is affecting your work or causing you to take time off sick, particularly this is more than 2 or 3 weeks at one go. Occupational health referrals will help your employer understand what adjustments need to be made to support you at work. Occupational health services may also make an assessment of your ability to do your job. If you disagree with this, it is important to seek a specialist legal advice because every employer may have a different arrangement. There is also government-funded occupational health service called Fit for Work. Now it offers free expert and impartial work-related health advice to employers, employees, and GPs. One way or other is to support the employees with their mental health and well-being, is to create an environment where staff can talk openly about any issues they are having. Employer needs to create this kind of a culture in several ways. Making sure regular meetings are occurring between employees and managers, encouraging mental health awareness trainings or workshops, appointing mental health champions employees can speak to, adopting a mental health strategy and implement a mental health policy. Train the managers on how to approach someone who is experiencing mental health problems. An employee is not able to work due to depression in the UK, the employment law in UK may protect them. Once they are off work, employer needs to make sure to check in at regular intervals, not to pressure the employee to come back to work. If they are off work for a substantial amount of time, it is up to employer to decide what period this is, and they may arrange a meeting with them to discuss getting them back into work. In this meeting, every employer needs to consider any reasonable adjustments they can make. Medical capability, dismissal for an employee who has depression is possible but can result in an unfair dismissal claim and large payouts if employer can't handle it. correctly. Fired for other mental health reason. Can an employer fire someone for other mental health issues? The simple answer is yes. So long as they follow a fair process, if the employee is suffering from severe anxiety or stress, the same rules apply. If the individual is suffering from a mental illness such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, the GP's recommendation, unlike depression or stress, some conditions such as bipolar disorder are automatically classed as a disability. Whether you have a mental health problem or not, your employer has a duty of care to you under health and safety legislations. You have the right to work somewhere safe. This means where any risk to your health are properly assessed and controlled. But more than employer, it is your duty towards you to be aware about your rights. Hope this helps. Have faith. At one point of time, I suffered the same problem. I needed to have faith in myself and believe I was doing the right thing. Given that 1 in 4 of us will experience mental health problems every year, we need to accept that. Even though we'd love to, most of us can't regulate our issues, so they occur outside office hours. Remember, we can only perform better when we are at our best. Jobs done for us. We are not meant for jobs. It will take some time, but everything will fall in place. On that note, thank you Sangeet Foundation and all the wonderful panelists and especially Joyan Dada for organizing this amazing event. Wishing everyone a very, very happy Holi. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Shubhangi Mitra. That was an interesting message. Definitely different perspective that we are looking into when it comes to mental health. Just something I wanted to mention to the audience. We'll have the discussion with our panel members now, but during the discussion, if you have any question that you want to ask, please, we would appreciate your questions, because towards the end, we will read out those questions, or if you want to say those questions out loud, please do so, and our panelists probably will be able to answer them here live and help you with the answers. But today we have got a volunteer to collect questions from you. She's Dr. Madhushri Mitra Ghosh. Thank you, Dr. Madhushri, for volunteering to take questions. So if you've got questions, she's got papers with her. If you don't want to say out the questions aloud, then please, if you can go up to her. She has got a piece of paper where you want to write the question to her. Please do so, but we would prefer if you can write your question in English. And then towards the end, we will read out those questions and get the answers from the panelists. So with that, I think I would like to start understanding, maybe from you, Dr. Nandini, that we're talking about mental health, mental wellness, mental illness, but all this different terminology, for a person who is not into it, might get confused. So what is the real difference between all these terms? What is the difference between emotional distress and mental illness or mental health? If you can just elaborate and explain to us, please.
A really important starting point as we are trying to understand various issues. It's very important to clarify various concepts. And let me give you an analogy. Let's say one day we have a difficult time at work, we've always been on our feet, we've not had time to have lunch or drink enough water. We come back home tired, joints aching, feeling really, really unwell. But we know that a good night's sleep, plenty of water, and a hot meal is going to cure that. However unwell we feel physically at that point, it's not a condition that will attract a physical health diagnosis, and you will know yourself that that's not something for which you're going to rush to your GP. You know, a bit of rest, a weekend, and you'll be fine. But at the same time, if you are, let's say for days you're starting to develop a fever, you have a cough, you're feeling generally unwell and there's nothing around you work-wise or exhaustion-wise to explain how you're feeling. And then you start to feel this is out of proportion to my circumstances, this is out of proportion to my day-to-day experience. I must be developing a physical illness. This is when I go to my GP to check it out. Depending on how unwell you're feeling, your apprehension of how physically unwell you might be might vary. And apply the same concepts to mental health. So one day when things at work haven't gone right, you have deadlines, several deadlines, you've had an altercation with your best friend, your childcare has fallen apart, etc. You know that if you're feeling stressed, that's very natural. Most human beings in your position would feel stressed. That is a natural human emotion that we do not have to give a name to, we do not have to diagnose, and that's not something that you need a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a counselor for. You need to sit down, get help from a friend, practical help, a cup of coffee, things sorted, and things are going to resolve on their own. But mental illness is a real concept, or rather mental illnesses. I hear so many people talking about mental health issues as if it was one big rubric. Or often we hear among society people talking about so-and-so is a mental patient, so-and-so is a psychiatric patient, as if that one label describes everything, and it isn't. We've got illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar, attention deficit hyperactivity. We've got neurodiverse conditions like autism, dyslexia. So each of these conditions are very separate, very different from each other. We don't have time to go into diagnostic criteria over here, but my very simple message is feeling unhappy is not necessarily clinical depression. For something to go from unhappiness to clinical depression, you're talking not only about stress, you're talking about chemical changes in the brain. And similarly, as in physical illness, you might get serious conditions which have got nothing to do with lifestyle choices, which have got nothing to do with what has happened in the environment, which might sadly have a strongly genetic component. The same thing can happen in mental illness. And those are the rarer conditions. But why do I mention those to you? Because as a society, we've got to understand. We've got to stop judging people. Every time somebody hears about a young person developing a serious mental illness, about being admitted to a psychiatric hospital, what's the first thing we think about? Oh, something's wrong in the family. The parents must have put them under pressure. What's going on at home? Oh, maybe that person is not that resilient, or maybe they took drugs. We start thinking about all things around, and families don't get the help and support because they're so ashamed to talk about their young people developing a serious mental illness. But there are so many things which develop without anything being wrong in the family, without there being any problems with parenting. And when I'm talking about distinctions, I will tell you, children having ADHD are not naughty children. Children having autism are not because their parents didn't teach them social skills. And dementia is not normal old age. So with those few thoughts in mind, back to you, Novarupa.
Thank you. That's a very interesting way of explaining, actually. Yeah. Obviously, you've mentioned about this interesting concept that somebody having a day-to-day stress doesn't necessarily going to lead into mental illness, quite rightfully. But are there any early signs, any symptoms that somebody can identify, well, this is actually a sign or a symptom or a trigger that might actually lead that person into serious mental illness at some point in future? Are there symptoms like that that can be identified up front?
Now there is, as I said, there's such a multitude of serious mental illnesses. There isn't a single set of symptoms that I could talk about for people to look out for. But the general theme would be when somebody starts behaving out of character, which is out of proportion to circumstances. So, okay, if I fail my exams, I'll cry for a few days. That's quite natural. But if somebody has a relative, a near one, who's behaving out of character without anything around them to obviously explain it, and if that is getting worse day on day, just not getting better, then don't leave it for things to resolve with tender loving care, and I'll take you out for coffee and lots of talking, and that will resolve things. There are actually illnesses which might not be linked specifically to triggers and stressors, and we've got to look up for these serious conditions which can come out of the blue. If anything is out of proportion, out of context, continuing and severe, seek professional help. That would be my overall theme.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Nandini, for sharing that with us. Thinking about mental health conditions, obviously, we don't want to go into that stage where we have developed mental issues. I'm sure there are ways of preventing that thing coming or happening in our life. So maybe a question to you, Dr. Raghu, are there any prevention mechanisms available? Is there any example that you can cite for us where a particular prevention mechanism has helped, or how do we even identify that, whether that is that prevention mechanism that has helped a person?
That's a very difficult question to answer. What I